and I am your moderator for this month's Conversations with Attorney General Ford. And joining us, as always, is Attorney General Ford. AG, I apologize, you're muted.
You would think by now I would have this down. And I was actually very good at what I was saying. I probably won't be able to replicate that perfection, just so you all know. Anyway, hi everybody, I'm Aaron Ford, I'm your Attorney General, and I'm honored to have with me today for the second installment of a monthly town hall discussion with my office that we call Conversations with AG Ford. Many of you may know who I am, but many of you may not know what it is that we all do here at the Attorney General's office. And how we're working hard to help protect Nevadans. On my second day in the office, I called out every member of my team together for a meeting, and I talked to them about my priority areas, which I like to call my 5 C's. These are constitutional rights, criminal justice and reform, consumer protection, client service, and community engagement. And I want everyone here with us today to know that these C's are all about you. That they're what my office uses to prioritize the ways we serve each of you and the way we serve our state. And they're why we're here today having this conversation, to focus on one of my C's, which is community engagement and constituent services. I guess 2 of my C's. On the last Wednesday of every month, I'll be introducing you to several members of what I call the AG family. You'll have the opportunity to learn more about what we do and to ask questions about our services. Last month, we talked to my Medicaid Fraud Control Unit on how they investigate and prosecute financial fraud and involve healthcare services. This week, I have with me Adriana Smith, the Director of my Constituent Services Unit, Sean Bowen, my Deputy Chief Investigator, and Holly Navarro, one of my criminal investigators. They're with me today representing 2 of the divisions in my office that help Nevadans every single day. When I first got elected as Attorney General, I knew that my primary focus would be on you, Nevadans, on helping you succeed. Here in my office, we have a Constituent Services Unit and an Investigations Unit. And these 2 units are what I call the frontliners for the Attorney General's office. They're taking your calls and emails, they're answering your questions, they're responding to your requests for help, and they're reviewing your complaints against individuals and businesses. And I'm grateful for their hard work and their dedication each and every day. So many Nevadans reach out to me on a daily basis asking about how they can get help and what they should do in a crisis. Today, these members of my office are going to walk you through how to contact my office, what issues we can assist you with, and how to file an official complaint for us to review. So listen up, y'all. Like I said earlier, I am delighted to be your Attorney General, and we're holding a session every month. And in the future, you'll continue to hear more from our division in my office. Remember to tune in on the last Wednesday of every month so that we can continue this conversation. And again, thank you so much for tuning in today. Teresa, back to you.
Thanks, AG. Welcome, Adriana, Sean, and Holly. As AG mentioned, Sean and Holly are investigators in our office. But before we get into investigations and specifically what areas they investigate, I want to start with Adriana and Constituent Services to talk about how complaints get to our office and how those get routed through to the Investigations Division. And so, Adriana, just starting off, how does someone file a complaint with our office?
Hi, thank you for having me. So all formal complaints that come into our office must be in writing using our consumer complaint form that is located on our website, and that website address is ag.nv.gov. We recently updated our electronic form, which is under the Complaints tab page, and the hyperlinks are located under General Complaints. The form is available in English and in Spanish. If you need a paper complaint, you can contact any of our office locations to get one mailed out to you. You may also go to our website and request one to be mailed out to you by simply emailing the Constituent Services Unit at aginquiries@ag.nv.gov. And the email address again is aginquiries@ag.nv.gov. Please add in the subject line requesting paper complaint. This will ensure your request will get to the appropriate staff member. In the body of the email, add your full name and mailing address, and please allow for 5 business days from for the form to get to you. Another thing is that we cannot take verbal complaints over the phone, emails, text messages, or messages through social media. So I encourage you to use our official form to file your complaint, as there are pertinent questions there that are helpful in our review process.
So I just got to jump in right quick, because that thing about no emails and no text messaging and no Twitter messages and LinkedIn, I can't receive a complaint like that, y'all. So we really need you to go to the website, go to ag.md.gov, find the complaint tab, and click on that. I just can't. I don't even use Facebook Messenger that much, and so please go to ag.md.gov to file your complaints.
Yes.
All right, so Adriana, so not counting anyone that may have tweeted at AG Ford a complaint, in looking at the data from last year, can you walk us through about how many complaints, inquiries, and comments we received from the public, and generally how those break down?
Sure. Give me just one second. Okay, here we go. The total number of complaints received in 2020, we received 8,042 complaints. The total number of inquiries and comments we received were 32,129. So the complaints are broken down by how they're delivered to our office. Electronic complaints are complaints that are submitted to our office through our online portal and by email. We received 5,326 through our online portal, and the paper complaints are received by mail and fax. So we received a total of 2,716 complaints. Now I'm going to jump into the inquiries and comments. Those are broken down by month and subject. So for example, for the month of July of 2020, we received 1,743 total, and then we then put them in 22 different categories, and those are ranging from opinions, consumer information, and legislative questions. So that's how we break those down.
I mean, listen to those numbers, y'all. That's a lot of complaints. And I don't say that from an excuse perspective. I say that from a knowledge perspective. People watching this should understand that we get thousands upon thousands of complaints. Sometimes they come in the right form. Sometimes they don't. And so what we try to do is to get folks to understand that it's going to take a little time sometimes. And Adriana, how many folks do you have working with you in the Constituent Services Unit?
I have 2 CSU representatives in Carson, and also 2 down here in Las Vegas. Of course, our reception staff, they are a tremendous help to CSU because they filter in the calls that should be going to our CSU unit in case somebody needs, like, assistance with their complaint or they need resources. So, shout out to our reception team in all our Las Vegas offices, and we're really grateful for their help.
So I think I heard you say 2 up north. Is that right?
Yes, 2
up
in
north,
Carson City. Yes.
2 down south, and you. Yes. That's 5, and
yes,
we got
for the whole state.
30,000 complaints. And we haven't even gotten to my investigators who have to investigate the complaints, which take time as well. So this is good information to be sharing. And you're right. Kudos to you. Kudos to our reception staff for helping us with this. We're dedicated and determined to try to provide good constituent services, but these numbers do tell a very harrowing story. So sorry, I butted in again, Teresa. Back to you.
No, thank you. Adriana, are the complaints confidential? Does someone have what happens with someone's personal information when they submit a complaint to our office?
Well, the complainant's personal privacy information is kept confidential, including withholding their name. However, the complaints may be treated as public record under the Nevada Public Records Act, and as such, limited information may also be released or provided to the public, subject to any confidentiality requirements for personal privacy information and law enforcement sensitivity information as well. So constituents, they can feel, relieved that their personal information is not going to be available to anyone that requests a complaint within the Public Records Act.
And so if someone files a complaint with our office, how do they find out the status of their complaint? Is there a mechanism for that?
Yes, there is. They can follow up by calling our Constituent Services Unit, and that phone number is 775-684-1128, and that's in our Carson City office. And then also the phone number for our Las Vegas office is 702-486-3420. We are very busy, as mentioned earlier. However, please allow us 48 hours to return your call, and we can update you on the status of your complaint. Also, if you submitted your complaint electronically, you may reply to the automatic notification you received when you submitted your complaint, and a CSU representative will update you on your status.
Thank you. And so once all the complaints actually make it through Constituent Services, many of them get routed to investigations. So Holly and Sean, can you walk us through that process of investigations intake, and how many complaints for investigation do you guys normally go through?
Yeah, hello Teresa, hello AG Ford and Holly and Adriana. Investigations receives a large portion of what comes through the front desk into our section for investigation if it's a criminal complaint and they've alleged criminal violations. Of the 32,000 that Adriana has received, we received approximately 4,500 in 2020. Those are primarily from CSU, but also from our law enforcement partners that we work with around the state. Sometimes they'll send stuff directly to investigations. So of those 4,500, they range a gamut of areas, obviously, and many of them come in that are not even under the jurisdiction of the Attorney General's office, but we will do our best to route them appropriately when they get to us and handle them accordingly. If they do fall within the jurisdiction of the Attorney General's office and in one of our crime categories, we will then screen it to determine whether or not a full investigation would be warranted. And
can you give us an overview of what specific areas of law that you guys do have jurisdiction to investigate?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I want to touch on right before we get into that is just the size of the unit, just so you know how large investigations is. But we have approximately 50 sworn criminal investigator positions statewide, and that covers Carson, Las Vegas, and Reno. We have 8 compliance investigators, 5 forensic analysts, and 8 investigative assistants. So that makes up the entire investigation division. Within that division, we cover, like you said, many crime areas. One that you heard from last month was the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, who deals with Medicaid fraud and elder abuse and facility-related crimes. We also have a missing children unit, a tobacco enforcement unit, human trafficking, cyber crimes or high-tech crimes, it's also called, insurance fraud, workers' compensation fraud, and then we have a unit called General Investigations. And General Investigations is really the catch-all for everything else that doesn't really have its own unit set up for. And that would include consumer protection things, one of AG Ford's 5 Cs, also public integrity crimes, elder abuse and exploitation that is of joint jurisdiction with the locals that require assistance, mortgage fraud, crimes by state employees, complex financial fraud, any conflict cases that might come from the police or sheriff's departments or the DA's office, we get involved in those as well. So as you can see, a limited number of individuals covering a large variety of crimes within the office.
And just let me jump in again, because it's important to note that Sean and Holly, I keep them busy. They say, I don't keep them busy, y'all keep them busy. They stay very busy, and last year, 32,000 complaints. That's not talking about the complaints from the year before. and the year before that. These investigations oftentimes take months, if not years, to undertake and undergo. So there's a lot of work that goes into this, and they are dedicated to it. They know what my priorities are relative to ensuring that we get as quick a response to our constituents as possible. And so they're under the gun from constituents and also from AG Forward under the 5 C's, so to speak. And I just want to, again, thank them for the work they put in, because it's a lot, and they do a good job at it. So thank you, Sean.
Thank you,
Sean, a lot of the areas of law and the crime areas that you mentioned kind of run parallel or mirror some of our prosecutorial divisions within our office. So could you maybe give an overview of how investigations works directly with the prosecutors, both in the early investigation phase and after a complaint is filed?
Yeah, Holly's going to discuss that a little bit for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Holly.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Complaints that are initially assigned to investigators will also be assigned to one of the prosecutors in our office. After the assigned investigator reviews the complaint and any documents that are attached to the complaint and reviews the preliminary investigation completed by our compliance investigators, the investigator may want to provide an overview of the case to the prosecutor. During this initial phase, the investigator and the prosecutor can discuss topics such as what type of fraud or other crimes may have been committed. These discussions can help investigators focus on keeping the investigation on the right track. During the investigation, new facts and new evidence will typically be discovered, which could take the investigation in a new direction. Investigators will work directly with prosecutors to ensure that evidence discovered during an investigation meets the elements of the crime as written in the Nevada revised statutes, which are the laws of our state. For example, during the initial investigation into a complaint, it may appear that the crime committed is embezzlement, for example. After gathering additional facts, the case evidence may not meet the elements of the crime of embezzlement. However, the evidence does meet the elements of the crime of theft. So having these discussions with the prosecutors will help keep the investigation on track. And lastly, after an investigator submits a case to the prosecutor and the case is approved for prosecution, the prosecutor may need additional information from the investigator in preparation for the case to go to trial. The investigator will work directly with the prosecutor to provide any follow-up requests from the prosecutor to ensure that the case is ready for trial.
And is there a difference between a compliance investigator and a criminal investigator, or how do those work?
Yes, the compliance investigators, they take the complaints that have been initially reviewed by Deputy Chief Bowen and some of our prosecutors in our office, and they'll do what we call the preliminary investigation, which will include things such as a background on some of the victims or witnesses. They might reach out to the victim to get a little bit more information that they can relay to the investigator, and just kind of get everything going for the investigator to start their full investigation.
And as we're talking about these areas of investigation that our office handles, some of these sound like they're on a bit of a larger scale than being in a single jurisdiction or even confined within our state. Could you guys talk about how our office works with, I know you've mentioned state and local law enforcement agencies or even federal law enforcement agencies on specific investigations, or are there ongoing task forces that you guys are working on?
Yes. At the time that a complaint is submitted, or even during an investigation, information may come to light that additional crimes were committed, which may not fall within the jurisdiction of our office. In instances like these, our office will reach out to the appropriate jurisdiction, whether that jurisdiction is on the local, state, or federal level. The proper agency within the jurisdiction can facilitate an investigation into the crimes that were committed within their jurisdiction. Although there are two investigations going on at the same time, so to speak, the two agencies, our agency will work with the other agencies together on the case as a whole. Each agency will have its own resources and expertise, which will help the case having the best chance of success during the prosecution phase. And it goes vice versa. Additionally, our agency may approach other agencies, including local, state, and federal, to assist in an investigation that we have started on our own. But we do have a handful of investigators in our office that are assigned to a task force. A task force is typically made up of investigators and detectives from various agencies who work together as a team to investigate a specific area of crime. There are advantages of having investigators from our office assigned to a task force. For example, it creates opportunities to create collaborative relationships among our law enforcement partners, victim service providers, and the communities that we serve. A task force can draw on the expertise of each of its members, share resources, which expands investigative possibilities to all, and participating agencies can receive an equitable share of forfeited proceeds derived from illegal activity. I'm currently assigned to an IRS financial crimes task force. In addition to myself, the task force is made up of 2 IRS agents, 1 detective from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, 2 detectives from the Henderson Police Department, and 1 detective from the Mesquite Police Department, and 1 gaming control officer. The task force mainly focuses on investigating crimes of money laundering. And since the IRS is a federal agency, members of the task force have been deputized as federal agents, therefore expanding our jurisdiction into investigations on the federal level.
Very good, thank you. And focusing on some of Attorney General's 5 C's, or 6 C's, focusing on community relations and community outreach and constituent services, we have a couple investigators who are designated as law enforcement and community liaison investigators. Can you go into a little more detail of what that means and how that plays into our 5 C's?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a program that was created under General Ford with the help of Chief Scott. And it was really created to foster relationships with the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. But also to develop community partnerships with community groups and organizations. The reason for this was really to engage the investigations division of our office in problem solving and in coordinating efforts, community policing oriented efforts, to where we're really looking at the program as teamwork between the community and the investigators. You know, so much of what law enforcement does, investigators included, are, they do typical things like conduct arrests and interviews of subjects and things, which are not always the best environment to interact with someone. And having a program like this has really been great for our office because it allows us opportunities to really work with community members in a positive way and help problem solve and, crime prevention type things. We actually have 6 investigators that are assigned to this program. There's 3 in the north and there's also 3 in the south, but they're not the only ones who do this type of work. Investigators and support staff through the division statewide participate in large operations such as National Night Out or Career Day or other large events, and we encourage all the staff to participate in these types of things. But the 6 that are dedicated to it, they're the primary, they're the lead on these type of opportunities. And when they come into the office, they will first be given those directives to make those contacts. And I encourage anyone watching, if you're with a community group or an organization that would like to meet with some of these community liaison investigators to discuss crime prevention or other related topics, I encourage you to reach out to the AG's office and request that. And we'll be happy to make that happen.
And I tell you, listen, we practice what we preach here. I actually started smiling as I heard Sean describe this. And by the way, he said it's well beyond the 6 who are designated as the liaisons. Everybody in the office is buying into this. You hear us talk about us. You hear me talking about trying to improve relationships between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. And one of my 5 C's, community engagement, specifically wants to address that. And then to have the buy-in of all of my investigators who are smiling as they do it and with real smiles to trying to interact and engage with the community it makes my heart swell up with pride in that regard. Because again, we want to practice what we preach here. We want to hear from community organizations and from community members about ways in which we can improve and what it is that we can do. And so even aside from receiving the complaints and trying to investigate them, that other sea of community engagement is readily present right now in this conversation we're having. So again, thank you so much for participating in that.
And touching on that, I mean, AG Ford, you've said this in the past, that law enforcement's only interaction with the public shouldn't be to make arrests. And within our office, besides the community liaison investigators, one investigative division that really seems to embody that is actually our missing children's unit. Holly or Sean, could you give us an overview of that process and how the child recovery process actually works?
Absolutely. And just to add one point to what you said, it's not just the missing children's unit that embodies that. We try to embody that in every unit. Unfortunately, in some situations, it's a little hard to, play the nice guy when you're dealing with a human trafficking subject or something like that. So it's a little more difficult. We really try to embrace this in missing children because of the nature of the issues that we're dealing with here. The missing children's unit primarily focuses on parental abduction cases. They usually involve situations where non-custodial parents take a child or several children from the custodial parent and refuses to return them. Our primary goals are locating and returning the children to the proper place. In order to accomplish that, we spend a lot of time talking to the individuals who are affected by these cases and educating parents on the mechanisms that are in place to rectify the situation in order to avoid criminal consequences. If we can sit down with a parent and say, okay, here's the steps that we must take in order to return this child, and it could go down the road and result in arrest of the parent and taking of the child and returning it. We prefer not to go down that road. This is obviously not our intended goal. Our intended goal is to get the child back to the left behind parent. But keep in mind, this is no easy assignment, this unit. As you can imagine, these are very emotional situations and cases that we're dealing with. And it takes a certain person with a very calm demeanor to work these cases because of the emotional aspect of it. The cases that we aren't able to work out, which are very few, luckily. In fact, this year we've done numerous child recoveries. I don't have a number at hand with me, but I would say it's probably in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 that we've recovered so far this year. And we've only had to make one arrest, and that one arrest came yesterday. But at the same time, there's satisfaction in the work that these investigators are doing. We recovered 2 children yesterday and unfortunately had to arrest the parent, but these children had been missing for 2 years. They had not seen their mother in 2 years. And to see them embrace their mother and be reunited with them yesterday was very touching, and it was a great experience. But we reserve those tools, arrest in this situation, for the special cases. A lot of time has gone by. The abducting parent has taken measures to hide these children for a considerable length of time, such as change their name, move out of the area, change their appearance, things like that. Those are the type of steps that someone's deliberately trying to commit a crime to get away with something. So luckily it doesn't come to that very often, and I applaud the staff in that unit for the efforts and the work that they put forward that results many times in not having to use those criminal enforcement mechanisms.
Every week when we have our weekly all hands meetings, we're talking about criminal prosecutions, we're talking about civil litigation, general office updates. It's always really, really heartwarming when Chief Scott can say, this week we recovered a child. That's always, for me, it's always kind of the best part of one of these weekly meetings is knowing that having a tangible reminder of the good that our office does. It's always a really heartwarming experience. For Holly and Sean, we actually got a question in the chat box following up on one of your comments about investigations earlier. And the question is, what happens if I file a complaint with the Attorney General's office and the office determines it needs to be routed to another agency? Is the complainant notified that it's being routed to another agency, or what are the next steps?
So there's actually a mechanism in place, and we've been working closely with Adriana. So I'll give you kind of the short answer, and maybe she can expand on it for you. As you might have guessed, CSU and investigations have worked very closely together as these things route through to the different areas. But what they're building, and I believe they have set up, once we finish screening something inside of investigation and it results in either a resolution or a referral out to another agency, or it's just simply closed, then CSU goes back in and does a query and figures out which ones are closed, and their plan is to reach out to the constituents and notify them of that occurrence. If a case gets opened and goes into an investigative phase, that's not something we're going to share, because now it kind of becomes somewhat secret as the investigation's done, and eventually you'll know, but at that point in time, you're not going to know. But the others, we are putting together a mechanism with Adriana so that she's able to share that information. And that's the type of, I think, the notification she's giving. If people call to follow up, she's able to share that once they get triggered in a certain way.
Yes. So we do have these procedures in place. So once we know that the complaint has been closed and it should be directed to another agency, the constituent will receive a letter directing them which agency they should contact directly. In some cases, we do send the complaint to the agency and just notify the constituent that we have already forwarded their complaint, so they just need to follow up with that agency, depending on what it is, everything.
Great, thank you. And for Holly and Sean, one topic that's really been, unfortunately, on the forefront of everyone's mind this past year involves unemployment fraud. And so can you talk about how our office investigates or prosecutes unemployment fraud? How do we work with DETR on unemployment fraud, and how is our investigation different from the scope of what DETR investigates?
Absolutely. It has been an enormous undertaking over the last year, since the beginning of the pandemic, dealing with the unemployment fraud that's going on. Of the 4,500 or so complaints that I referenced coming into investigations, I don't have the exact number, but I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 of them are related to unemployment fraud. It is a huge problem right now throughout the country, not only in Nevada, but throughout the country. And that number obviously exceeds our ability to investigate every single one of these fully. So we've had to put in mechanisms of how we can combat this problem. And the first step that we really take, we work very closely with DETR and their investigators to identify these fraudulent claims and then immediately relay that information to DETR so that they can shut the claims down. We don't want them to continue paying money out on a false claim. So that's our first line of defense. Next, we try to identify the complaints that involve numerous victims or patterns within them that indicate organized groups are involved in these crimes. And that's where we're really focusing our investigative efforts so that we can really use the most efficient use of our time working in areas that are affecting numerous people. So that's where we're spending a lot of our time. A typical investigation, as you know, includes interviewing victims, witnesses, subjects, the whole gamut. But these are unique because there is so much digital information involved in these cases that it does take time. Not only has the claim been filed digitally, and we have to work our way through that end of it, but then it digitally goes to the bank, and then the bank processes the benefits, and those benefits then either go out through a direct deposit or through a debit card. And then if that's going to the wrong person, that's a whole new trail of information you have to follow to identify where it went. And then eventually you get to the end user and you have the point of sale transactions or the subsequent transfers between banks and green dot cards and money order purchases. I mean, the digital information on these investigations is massive, but we have worked tirelessly on these cases, and we've worked with our partners. We've participated in the COVID-19 task force that involves a lot of the local and federal partners, and we've shared information with other agencies. We've got not only our own investigations open, but we have agency assists, what we refer to as, where we work in helping other agencies with their investigations. So like, for example, we recently received a call from a detective out of New York State, and they had made an arrest on an individual that was found to possess numerous unemployment cards from Nevada. And obviously this person's identity wasn't on all of these. In fact, their identity was on none of these cards. So we're now helping New York State work that investigation because it does affect Nevada. So there's so many things in the works right now to combat these efforts without, you know, getting down into the weeds of it. But with regard to your secondary question you had about DETR investigators and how they vary from what we do, our primary focus is to investigate the crime and then prosecute the crime. DETR's focus is a little different. They are centered around the regulatory action behind the claim, and they're really what we refer to as our experts in determining what happened on the claim end. We're going to call them and say, explain this to me. How did this happen? What was the order of these events that took place? You know, how did they get into the system? You know, things like that. So we really work hand in hand in all the investigations with the DETR investigators because they're really the experts in the claims information, and they have access to all the systems, and they're able to do that analysis to kind of tie these victims together and the subjects together and stuff like that. So they've been very instrumental in many of the cases that we've worked.
And if someone thinks that they might be a victim of unemployment fraud, where do they file a complaint?
So we are directing them primarily to file a complaint with DETR because that is the most direct route. If they believe that their identity has been used to file an unemployment claim, like they received a notice from their employer or they received a card in the mail or something like that because, you know, the subject accidentally directed it to the right location instead of the alternate location. So I would file a complaint directly with DETR, but there are other resources you want to take, and I would encourage you to reach out. I believe there might even be a press release we have that outlines like the IRS resources and things like that, so that you can notify the IRS of things. I'm not really sure. Adriana might know a little bit more about those.
Yeah, let me just chime in real quickly. One of the things that we have said is to use the website IC3, I believe it's .gov. I could be wrong, maybe it's .org, but we'll double check that. But IC3.gov, you should go there as well if you think you've been a victim of fraud in that regard in terms of unemployment insurance. That helps with the joint task forces that we have out there related to COVID-19 scams.
And I'd like to add, don't be nervous if you filed a complaint with our office but not with DETR in the past, because we have a direct line with DETR. And every single unemployment fraud claim that comes into our office, we have a system in place to relay that information to DETR almost immediately. So know that it's getting there eventually, but please use them as the first line of defense when reporting these things.
Yes, I agree with Sean with that. Please, if you believe you are a victim of identity theft, submit your complaint to the DETR fraud unit. But if you did submit a complaint to our office, you most likely will receive a letter or will receive a letter stating, giving you all the information. It has a link to our press release, the link to the DETR fraud unit, also things to do to prevent any type of future identity theft, and that's going to the FTC website, contacting the 3 credit bureaus, doing a credit freeze on your credit report, and things of that nature. So we do, CSU does provide some other resources that are helpful, and will, help you prevent like any type of identity theft in the future.
Thank you, Adriana. That was very helpful. We are at about the end of our time here. Attorney General Ford, did you?
Yeah, listen, I just want to say thank you again to Teresa for organizing this, and thank you to Sean and to Holly and to Adriana for participating, and thank you to the viewing audience for tuning in. This is an important opportunity that we have as the Attorney General's office to try to engage at some level with the community about what it is that we do. A lot of people know we put people in jail, but they don't know everything else we do. We want to be able to have those conversations. And so thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you at our next one, the last Wednesday of April. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Yep, that'll be Wednesday, April 28th. We will be with workers' comp. Thank you, everyone.